All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're joining us from, and welcome to today's webinar, the State of Maintenance 2021 Findings. A couple pieces of quick housekeeping before we get started. The session is being recorded, so you'll receive the link to the recording once the session is over. Q&A will be at the end of the session, so please make sure to use the question box throughout, and we'll be sure to answer those at the end. You'll find the question box on your right. You'll see chat, questions, and polls. Make sure that you use that question box to submit your questions. Finally, as you all know, we're sharing trends today from data that we collected in the 2021 State of Maintenance Survey. So I just want to say a sincere thank you to everybody who participated in the study. This would not be possible without you. And if you did participate in the study, you were into our raffle for gift cards and our grand prize Apple Watch. So stay tuned until the end of the session. We'll be announcing the winners then. And as a bonus to say thanks for everybody attending today, we're also raffling off an Apple Watch to one of you attending live. So without further ado, I'll pass it off to you, Ryan, to get us started.
All right. Thank you so much, Maura, and welcome. Happy Tuesday to everyone, and thank you so much for taking the time to join us on this very special day where we're going to be presenting the State of Maintenance, our 2021 findings. Before I jump in, I want to make sure that this chat box is working. So if everyone who's joining us today can type into the chat, tell me, what your name is, what your title is, and where you're watching from. Let me know that this chat bubble is working on this new application that we're using called LiveStorm. I hear some Vancouvers. We've got what else?
We got Steve from Sparwood, BC.
All right, yeah. All right. Oh my gosh, it's flowing in right now from, oh my God, Indiana, San Diego, New York, California. Oh my gosh. All right. I love it. It seems like it's working. What do you think, Rob?
Oh man, Boston, Massachusetts. I haven't been there in a while since college, and I love that.
All right. Wow. We've got a huge group joining us today, and I'm really excited to present our State of Maintenance 2021 finding. So it seems like our chat bubble is working. I really appreciate everyone joining in today. Really excited to showcase what we've learned. So just to give you guys some background, what we're going to be talking about is presenting our survey of over 1,000 people in the maintenance reliability industry. What we wanted to do was figure out trends in the industry, figure out what's happening, how are different departments, how are different industries being affected by what's going on and what the future lays ahead of us. So I'm really excited to present all of our findings. Before I get started, though, I want to meet our speakers. So before I pass it over to Rob and Ricky over here, my name is Ryan. I'm the CEO and founder of UpKeep. I was a chemie from Cal Berkeley, and I went to go work in a manufacturing plant where I saw how bad technology was and said, I want to build something better. So that's a little bit about me right now, the CEO of UpKeep. We've helped support over 10,000 businesses and had the opportunity to interact with thousands of ground floor maintenance technicians all the way up to senior leaders within Fortune 500 companies. That's a little bit about myself. Alongside with me presenting today, we got Rob Kalwarowsky, who's a consultant at Kalwarowsky Consulting, experienced leader in the space. I've had the pleasure of getting to befriend you, Rob, over the past several years, and I know how much you've done over the past few years for this industry. You're the host of a few really, really special podcasts and also a reliability leader over there in Canada. How's it going, Rob?
No, thanks for having me, Ryan. You say befriend like it was a bad thing or something.
No, absolutely. It's been an amazing time getting to learn from you, quite frankly. And then also we've got Ricky Smith, who's an expert in residence here at UpKeep. Ricky Smith has over 30 years working in the maintenance reliability space, from Exxon to the U.S. Army, and also several other world-class maintenance reliability plants across the U.S. He's a CMRP, CMRT, CRL, all of those acronyms behind his name. Do we have Ricky in yet, Maura? I know we're having some trouble, some technical difficulties.
He'll be joining us shortly. He's gonna try to reboot his desktop, so he'll be on just as soon as he's back and
All
available.
right. Well, Ricky is definitely here with us. He might be jumping on in just a few moments, but Ricky is amazing. I'm really glad to have both Ricky and Rob here with us today. All right, so just to dive right into the introduction here, this is the most diverse survey in the maintenance and reliability industry today. We've surveyed over 1,000 different maintenance and reliability professionals all across the world. This spans 18 different industries, 73 different countries all across the globe. We surveyed small companies, medium-sized companies, big companies, very, very big companies. And it has such a wide breadth of different maintenance budgets, anywhere from $500,000 to over $1 billion a year in maintenance reliability spend. This is truly the most in-depth and broad study in the maintenance reliability industry that I know of, at least. So I'm really excited. Before I jump into some of the some of the findings, what I wanted to showcase was some of the goals for our survey. Why did we do it? Ultimately, what we wanted to do was better understand the challenges and future trends impacting you guys, the maintenance and reliability leaders of today and also tomorrow. We wanted to understand how different behaviors are changing and also how the attitude of maintenance professionals are changing in relation to how teams are behaving, how technology is adapting and changing the future outlook of maintenance and reliability. And also we wanted to look at the impact of what's currently going on in today's day and age with regards to COVID, the pandemic, and also where technology is leading us in the future. And so that was the goal of our survey. And I can definitely say that we had some really amazing insights that came out of this survey. Before I go deep into some of the key findings of our survey, which today we'll be sharing 4 of the key findings, I want to talk a little bit about who was part of the study and who was part of this survey. Just to give some perspective here, we had 73 different countries be represented in this survey that we did. 72% came from the US, 7% in Canada. We had a small little population of folks that surveyed in Australia, Mexico, UK, and all across the world. So again, you're really seeing a very diverse set of respondents, and all of this survey, all of these results come from a survey population of over 1,000 maintenance reliability professionals. To go in a little bit deeper, roughly about 68% of the companies that we surveyed were under 1,000 employees. 59% of people that we surveyed had less than 10 people on their maintenance team. The typical level of person that we surveyed and that responded to the survey was either a supervisor or a maintenance manager. And 58% of our sample size, 58% of our surveys had annual revenues. The company had annual revenues up to $100 million. And most maintenance budgets were somewhere between $100,000 to $1 million per year. So again, we had this very, very broad, diverse set of respondents, but this is kind of honing in a little bit more about who was the core group of survey responders. Additionally, this is looking at titles of who responded. We're seeing a lot of facility managers, maintenance managers, reliability engineers, and a whole lot of other. We saw a bunch of different industries that got captured, over 18 different industries. And we kind of broke it out into the most concentrated industries being manufacturing, plants, food and beverage manufacturing, and a small subset of facilities management. But again, what you're seeing is we surveyed every single industry, almost several different countries in the world. So really excited about that. All right, so we've gone over a little bit about demographics and who is part of the survey. What I'm going to do next is showcase and share 4 of the key findings that we had from our survey. And the first one is in relation to maintenance budgets and how maintenance budgets have been changed, or are planning to change next year. And again, I kind of said I want to keep this this webinar today super interactive. So I want to ask the entire crowd a question here. Do you think that maintenance budgets have changed as a result of COVID-19 within the maintenance and reliability space? So what Maura is going to do is she's going to use our poll. I would love to see what everyone thinks. Do you guys think that budgets have changed much year over year? Have they increased, decreased, stayed about the same? What do you guys think?
All right, our poll is live. I'm starting to see some responses come in. So we'll give it about 10, 15 more seconds, and then we can go over what the highest response was, as well as what our finding was.
Yeah, so I'm already reading in the chat here. I see a lot of yes, it definitely has changed. I've seen some decrease. I've seen some say that it actually increased, and a few stayed about the same.
All right, I'm going to close the poll. So according to our poll, 52% of our respondents think that budgets have decreased, and that is our largest answer, followed by stayed the same and then increased.
All right, I love this. I love having this interactive session here. We surveyed 1,000 different maintenance reliability teams. And here's what was really interesting from our survey. What we found was that maintenance and reliability teams actually have been quite resilient through COVID-19. We went into the study thinking kind of the same thing, roughly about, we thought that we were going to see a drastic decrease in maintenance budgets over the past year, given what's been going on. But at least from the 1,000 people that responded to our survey, they told us that roughly about 64% of businesses have had actually very small changes to their budget. What they were saying was that actually, maintenance reliability teams were very resilient through this very trying time right now, and that we thought that maintenance budgets were going to get cut quite drastically, but what actually we saw in the survey results was that, there was actually very small changes within their budget. Now, we started trying to dig a little bit deeper. Hey, was it because of the industry? Was it because of the title? Was it because of the country and the world and the globe that they were in? And we sliced and diced it in so many different ways. The one thing that we did find was some industries get hit a little bit more tough. And we're going to bring up the oil and gas industry because we saw when we were cutting the data by industry, the one industry that did actually have the greatest decrease in maintenance reliability budget was actually in the oil and gas industry. What I wanted to do was showcase a little bit more about the data that we pulled from the 1,000 maintenance reliability professionals and showcase, what the data was actually sharing with us. We saw largely, 24% of respondents to our survey said that budget actually didn't change. We saw 20% say that it was increased or decreasing slightly, 20% saying that it was actually increasing slightly. We had a smaller, roughly about 20% say that there was an increase, or a decrease by a moderate amount, and only 6% of people said that either it was increasing by a great amount or decreasing by a great amount. And so again, what that really told me was the importance of maintenance and reliability teams, and how resilient they are through a global pandemic that we're going through. We started going deeper into the data and started to ask, hey, why is this happening? And so if you remember, we did this survey back in October. And what we found when we started looking back into our data, at the start in Q1, at the start of COVID, there was a big negative impact to GDP growth in manufacturing across the world. I believe if we had surveyed people back in Q1, we would have seen very different results. But because we surveyed everyone in October, where we're starting to see GDP growth actually recover quite a bit from where we were in Q1, I think that's why we started to see a lot of the resilience in the maintenance reliability teams. All right, there we go, Ricky. We got you on.
Hey, sorry about that.
All right. So we're just going over how resilient maintenance reliability teams have been through this very trying times. We looked at GDP growth and how it's impacted in Q1, but also how it's largely been recovered over the last, let's call it three quarters or so, which might help explain why we're seeing a lot of our respondents say that maintenance reliability team budgets haven't actually changed a whole great amount. So now that
I wouldn't expect it to.
So now that we got you on, Ricky and Rob, I want to ask you guys the question. I'm not the expert here. You guys are. So I want to ask you guys the question. How do you think maintenance and reliability budgets will actually change in 2021, next year, as it relates to COVID? Maybe a secondary question. What are the different types of industries you're seeing impacted by COVID, and how? Rob, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, I mean, for me, what I've seen out there is capital budgets have been decreased. So capital spending has gotten cut. I've heard that not only from the people I talk to, but also the companies that I work for. But yeah, the maintenance budget, I mean, at the end of the day, I always talk about maintenance as putting gas in a car, right? There's only so far that you can drive your car without filling back up with gas. So to me, like you can defer PMs, you can defer, some of these maintenance tasks, but eventually your car's going to stop running. And so that's how I see it. Like I don't, and I think another thing to just be aware of is some stuff in maintenance has to go up just because of the safety aspects around COVID. And so that's probably playing into it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it kind of depends on which industry. And so maybe it's a good question for me to you, Ricky. Like, are you seeing different types of industries being impacted by COVID, and how? And how does that ultimately impact budgets in the maintenance reliability department, next year and, 5-10 years out in the future?
Overall industry, I haven't seen a lot of difference. The facilities, I have. Facilities has been a big impact on them. But I also see that as this transition in the U.S. as far as politically, there's going to be some ramifications of that. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. I think that's uncertain at this time. But that's going to be a big player.
Absolutely. And I'm seeing so many good comments over here in the chat. I think one big takeaway was actually a comment by Eric Towns here, who mentioned the uncertainty of the pandemic makes it difficult to project budgets. I think that's one thing we could say without a doubt. The pandemic has kind of thrown us in a big loop. So even if I'm trying to project what's going to happen next year and how our maintenance budgets are going to change, because there's so much uncertainty, it makes it very difficult to project what the future lies ahead of us. But I think
and just something, there's one here that says I feel like it's going to decrease because there's reduced loading on machines. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's very industry dependent, right?
Yes.
Like we've talked, I talked to a guy out of the UK when the pandemic started, and he was saying like basically the auto plants that he works with shut down completely, where the food was running 110-ish%, right? And so we can't say that like maybe in our specific industry, the loading has decreased, but it's going to very much depend on like what we actually produce.
Absolutely. And Rob, you and I and Ricky were talking about this the other day, and we're also saying, when machines are actually down, this actually is a really interesting opportunity for maintenance reliability teams to go in and run those PMs, go in and do those inspections where they couldn't because it was running at 110% capacity or whatnot. So it varies by industry, but again, the main big takeaway is that maintenance and reliability teams, from what we've seen through this survey, very surprising, have stayed very resilient through this trying time.
I'll give you just one plant I'm at right now. It's a fiber plant, and they haven't seen anything but an upkick in business. You know,
Yeah.
so it's not going down with them; they're seeing it going up, and that's what we're trying to figure out now is how we're going to prepare for it because they lost a lot of people, and trying to figure out how we're going to get back back on track, but by having the right people in the right jobs.
Absolutely.
We noticed one of the things we talked about, main thing was plant maintenance planning and scheduling, because that way you don't have to necessarily get as many more maintenance people as you do to enhance wrench time. You know, optimize wrench time is a big deal in most companies.
Absolutely. All right. I love the conversation that's going on in the chat over here on my right side of this screen. So keep it going. Keep it going. I want to showcase and share our key finding number 2, and it's all centered around maintenance and reliability KPIs and metrics in 2021. So again, I love how interactive this session has been. We're going to keep it that way. So again, we're going to ask the entire group here, what do you guys think is the top metric that maintenance and reliability teams care about the most? And this is kind of a verbatim question that we asked on our survey that 1,000+ people responded to. We're going to bring it up in a poll. We'd love everyone's thoughts and answers. And then what we'll do after that is showcase and share what our 1,000 survey responders actually said.
Yep, so our poll is live. Keep sending in your thoughts, and we'll leave it open for about another 20 seconds. And then I'll let you guys know what our biggest response metric was. Looks like right now, let's see, give it a couple more seconds here for responses to trigger in. See some extra responses in the chat as well. All right, and I'm gonna close the poll here. So it looks like our biggest response group of 34% is unplanned breakdowns as the top metric, followed by uptime, and then followed by equipment effectiveness in third.
Awesome. Thank you, Maura. And thank you everyone for responding as well. And what I heard was largely also what we heard from the survey respondents also. The biggest concern for people in maintenance reliability teams was all centered around breakdowns and uptime. But before we get into that, what I also wanted to showcase, we actually asked 2 questions. One, what is the biggest concern that you have for your maintenance reliability team? And then 2, what's the most common KPI that you measure? And what we found was that a really interesting finding. There's a big disconnect between what matters, what people's biggest concerns are, and what's actually measured and tracked. Because the most common KPI that maintenance leaders actually measure is planned maintenance. But again, the biggest concern that teams had was, not related to planned maintenance. And so Ricky, Rob, and I had a really interesting conversation earlier this week, or last week actually, centered around this topic. What's going on? Why is there such a big disconnect between what matters and what's measured? I love that, David. You can't manage what you can't measure.
Wow, that's a good quote. We have to coin that one.
So let's dig into the data real quick. The top 3 challenges that maintenance teams faced in 2020 was 31% unplanned equipment breakdowns, work documentation, and 29% constant interruptions or disruptions at work. The biggest challenges by industry, because we're trying to cut it by different industry, different user type, different levels, different size of company. What we found was that in manufacturing, asset-intensive businesses really cared about managing unplanned equipment breakdowns. Government, biomedical laboratories cared a lot about documentation. Facilities cared most about productivity and team communication. But again, this goes back to this idea or the disconnect between what they care about and what the biggest top KPIs that they're managing. 47% of people said that the top KPI is planned maintenance, and only 32% of people said, they're measuring unplanned asset downtime and 31% uptime, 28% schedule compliance, and 23% OEE. So again, there's a disconnect because, we're saying that, a bulk majority of people care deeply about unplanned breakdowns, but only 32% of people or companies, or at least our survey respondents, are actually measuring that. And so again, to David's point, you can't manage what you don't measure.
Yeah.
We were trying to cut this data in so many different ways to better explain what's going on. We were trying to say like, hey, maybe it's because of the industry, they care about different things. Oh, maybe it's because of the level, whether it's an individual contributor, manager, supervisor, or senior executive, the owner, the VP. And we cut the data so many different ways from company size. And regardless of the way that we cut it, planned maintenance was still the most measured KPI across every single department, all different levels. And so that really led us to this really interesting finding around there being a disconnect between what's measured and what actually, what businesses actually care about. So I want to ask the question to our experts here, Ricky and Rob. What did you find most surprising about the results? And how do you select the right KPI? Maybe we could start with Ricky over here.
I think one of the right KPIs to me is rework is a big deal. A lot of people don't. If we have equipment that we've worked on, whether it's planned maintenance or whatever, do we go back to it again? Is there something wrong? Was the PM program incorrect? Was the procedure that we have a planned maintenance not right? What was the problem? And with that, we got to get to the root cause of the problem.
Yeah. So rework wasn't even listed on one of the top KPIs.
We've been talking about that all day at this plant. They're like, "Wow, we never thought about rework."
I think rework is like definitely one that we need to talk about more, right? Like rework is measuring the quality of the work that was done, and that includes like, did you troubleshoot for the right thing? Did you fix it in the right way, right? And I think like that's a metric that we need to start talking about from a maintenance context that I think it doesn't get enough cred that it needs.
Yeah. So Rob, what did you find most surprising about some of the results and the data that we found from our survey?
Yeah, for me, I mean, the conclusion I drew, Ryan, when it was listed that PM or planned maintenance was the number one metric that people cared about, like the conclusion that I drew was basically like looking at the demographics of the people who answered and saying like these companies are typically smaller companies that don't have large maintenance teams. They probably don't have a reliability engineer, and therefore they're just trying to move from completely reactive to get some work orders in and start doing PMs. And so that's what I took from that. And I think like in terms of how do you select the right KPI, it all depends to me is where you are in the journey. And so if you're completely reactive, then yes, like maybe planned maintenance is going to be one that you look at. Obviously rework, I would still recommend you use it as well, but it's something where it's like you're trying to move away from just firefighting, where if you're already doing predictive maintenance, then planned maintenance percentage is not necessarily the metric that's going to be driving you. You're going to want to go something more advanced, which might be, an OEE or a maintenance spend or something like that.
So you bring up a really good point, which is really the demographics of people that filled out our survey. And you pointed out a really good thing, which is, the maturity of your company actually might reflect what types of KPIs that you're looking at. To your point, it actually does take more time, effort. It does create more work to measure some of these more sophisticated KPIs, rework being one of them, OEE is another one. So maybe the question here, Ricky, I'd love your thoughts on this. Do you have any suggestions for a company who's got a limited maintenance staff or maintenance team to try to elevate the KPIs that they're looking at? Let's call it maybe rework being one of them.
Yeah, I think it's not complicated. We look at the steps in the maintenance process. We got preventive maintenance. So what metrics do we use for that? Predictive maintenance. What metrics do we use for that? Planning. What metric? Scheduling. What metric? Work execution. What metric is that? That's where rework falls in. And then we go to, our failure reporting, analysis, and corrective action system. So, if we measure those things, they can tell us a lot.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing I just want to say with this one is, like ISO 55000, asset management, you need to cascade your metrics down from what your business goals are. So whatever metric you pick, it's got to align with what you're trying to do with your company, what is next for you in 2021 and beyond. And so if you're thinking about a metric and you cannot draw a line between that metric and what you're trying to do, it's probably not the right metric.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm continuing to see such a great discussion in our chat here from Tyler saying, unplanned breakdowns creating and triggering this emotional response. I definitely feel that. Having alignment is really key. It doesn't really matter which metric that you track, as long as it's tied up to the ultimate goal of the business. I think these are all such good points that I absolutely love having this discussion around. So I kind of want to get into our key finding number 3. So now we're about halfway into our session. I feel like I'm making, we're right up on track on time here. So what I want to do is move into this next section, which is all around team adoption. And what I want to do is, again, kick things off with a question to the entire audience. Do you find maintenance software easy or difficult to adopt? This should be an easy question, right? I want to throw it up in a poll. We'll see what everyone thinks, and then we'll share what all of our survey responders said in the aggregated data form.
Yep, the poll is live, and we're starting to see some responses come in. It's actually pretty across the board, so will be interesting. We'll give it a little bit more time just to make sure that everybody has a chance to answer. And I know there's some ad hoc responses in the chat as well.
Got some ad hoc ones. Difficult. People are resistant to change. Difficult. Depends on the software. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Give it a couple more seconds here. Make sure you get your responses in. All right, and I'll close it. So our largest response was difficult with 42% of the responses, followed by in pretty close second place, neither easy nor difficult with 33%.
All right, all right. So we're going to share the results here, and instead of saying, it's easy across the board or difficult across the board, we really went deep into the metrics to figure out what were the most common, what correlated closest to whether someone chose easy or difficult. And what we found was that implementation success is most closely correlated to which software choice that they chose and also the team size. And so I'm already kind of reading it over here in the chat, and it kind of says, it's easy for some. It depends on what software you use. It depends on the industry or how big your team is. And that's exactly what we saw too when we're cutting the data, slicing and dicing it so many different ways. What we saw was that the larger the team size, the harder it is to adopt new software. And obviously this makes sense. Bigger teams make it much more difficult to train and implement because you've got to move a bigger ship. And
you got to get everyone bought in. And
right.
Yeah.
It's leadership.
The knowledge is the big deal. Them understanding the value of it.
Exactly. And then what we also saw too, which was highly correlated to a team's success implementing new technology, new software, was that 60% of respondents who used an integrated CMMS with their ERP reported that their software was difficult to use. So we kind of saw this like trend of choosing which software and also how big the team was. And Ricky and Rob, you both brought up really good points. It's all around leadership. And we talk about the larger your team size is, I think the thing that we need to also remember is there's bigger risk. If we have a bigger team and we're trying to adopt new technology, new software, we have to be able to put in the time, resources to make sure that it's a success. Because the bigger the team is, the bigger the fall is. The more investment that you put into purchasing software, and bigger teams spend millions of dollars on this, and if we don't get it right, it's a bigger fall.
And I think one of the things falls into this, Ryan, is the we get roles and responsibilities defined about the CMMS, during the implementation stage, but also in the execution stage is very valuable. Is to find those roles and responsibilities. Remember, I showed it many times, our RACI charts. A RACI chart's a great way for people to see how do we work together with this CMMS effort.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I think both our chat was saying, people in the current live discussion going on right now, that what they're saying, and also what we saw from the data. What we were seeing was that it's pretty evenly split. I mean, this almost looks like a perfect bell-shaped curve you've got some people at the outer edges saying that it's very difficult or very easy. A decent number of people saying that it's easy, a decent number of people saying it's difficult, and a large majority of people saying neither easy nor difficult. And so when we're trying to dig into this data, try to figure out what led people to say it was very easy or very difficult, two things really shined out at us. It was team size and also the software choice.
I mean, that bell curve to me just shows the leadership skills of the people who's like filled out the survey, right? If you're a great leader, you're definitely going to find it easy to get people bought in, and you're going to get it implemented in a great way. If you're a poor leader, you're not going to be able to do it. And like leadership is what helps you build culture. It's what helps you relate to the people for who they are and what they're trying to do. And like, that's all I see it. Like I've seen some CMMS implementations that costed over $100 million and took 10 years and were a bust. And I'm sure, Ryan, you have some that you could turn around in 6 months or a year and are a success, right? And I think like, to me, it comes down to leadership. How are you engaging your team? What's in it for them? And did you set up the processes, the procedures, and the training around it?
Absolutely. And, there's so many good conversations going on right now, from Peter saying that culture is absolutely huge. And I think you're bringing up a good point too, Rob, which is really around leadership. So I guess perfect segue into this next question. How do you best involve leaders in selecting the right technology for the team?
Well, they got to be engaged up front with it. And the reason why, what's in it for them? What's in it for the company? It's managing the assets. It's bringing that value back so we can reduce failure, so we can look at things that are repeating, that we're not doing it correctly, that we can solve. It's not difficult to figure that out. Companies that don't use the CMMS, their costs are high. Costs that fully integrate CMMS, use it properly, their costs are low.
Rob, any thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, I want to just jump there. How do you involve maintenance leaders in selecting? I mean, they have to be involved, right? And I think like you can't just let IT or supply chain dictate what you purchase, regardless if it's a CMMS or a bearing or whatever equipment you're using, right? You have to have the right stakeholders involved, and it can't just necessarily be the lowest cost solution, right? That's definitely just something that Edward jumped in the chat and said, our leadership's in another country and they're entrenched in the program that they use. Like if you're trying to get them to change, Edward, it comes down to what's in it for them? What's the benefit of
There you go.
them to change? And you have to
Absolutely.
speak to it from their perspective. And it's the same thing with the CMMS. The answer for your maintenance tech is going to be different than the answer for your CEO. Your CEO is going to care about lower cost of production, more efficiency for maintenance, higher wrench time, which is going to like improve productivity of the maintenance staff. Where like the guy on the shop floor, he's going to more care about like having the job plan on his phone, being able to get the parts he needs on time, making his life easier. It's, you got to speak to your audience, and it doesn't matter where your audience is, if they're in another country or not. It's basic people skills, basic leadership skills. That's what it is at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think you're getting a big head nod from Jim saying, know your audience.
Finish the year on a good note. Finish strong with a big finish.
All right. We got a video playing in the background. Sorry about that. So Ricky, I kind of want to ask you, you've seen so many different technology implementations in the past. What was it that made the best ones insanely successful?
Well, senior leadership being the leader of the implementation, the sponsor.
Easy.
Not complicated.
Not complicated. Right? I think it really reinforced.
When the senior leader says "thou shalt," then everybody says "yes, sir" or "yes, ma'am," and they do it.
Yeah. So
The only other thing I'd add to that, Ricky, is a good project manager.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I've seen some where the senior leader is sort of the quasi project manager, and yet they're trying to manage a team of 100 people and they don't have time to manage. And it's a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I know. I'm looking at one today.
So leadership, we talked about project management, having a dedicated person that's responsible for the success and managing the day-to-day. And a big one, Rob, which you mentioned was culture of the team, culture of change. All right.
It's crazy we're talking about this, when CMMS has been around a long time,
It's been around a long time. You're right.
And yet we still have people using paper and pen. And
Yeah.
we also have people using, I saw an MS-DOS CMMS a few years ago, and I was shocked that you could even still have that on a computer.
Rob, you're lining me up for this next section here, aren't you? All right. We're going into maintenance systems. So we asked this question verbatim on our survey to 1,000 people. What percentage of teams do you think are using technology to manage their maintenance and assets in 2020? You perfectly lined this one up, Rob. We're going to throw out a poll to everyone. What percentage of people do you think, what percentage of teams do you think are using technology to currently manage their maintenance and assets in 2020?
And our poll is live. We're starting to see a lot of responses coming in. There actually are two that are neck and neck right now, which I think everyone will be interested to see the results on the next slide. But they're battling it out. Literally one keeps going up and then the other keeps overtaking it. So we'll give it just a little bit more time. Make sure you answer the poll question. We have one overtaking now. All right, I'm gonna close the poll, and our results are that 43% of our respondents thought that 66% of teams are using technology to manage their maintenance and assets, closely followed by 42%. So Ryan, go ahead and share our results.
We need a drum roll. What's the right answer here? All right, so it sounds like, it actually sounds like a lot of people were right, actually. The majority of people in the survey were right. And, it makes sense. We asked the same exact question on the survey, and we think that the people here today are roughly representative people that took the survey. So you guys were right. 66% of participants surveyed in 2020 are are using a CMMS, are using technology to manage their maintenance and assets. You know, Rob, we were kind of talking about this right before, but that's still surprising to me. We're in 2020. And
how much money do we spend on the software, and all we're using is 66% of using it? Come on.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how we're in 2020 and we're not using a software.
I know. It was a condition of employment at one place I worked.
Oh, wow. Yeah. But here's what's really fascinating. What we found from this survey, this is actually up from our last year's survey, where only 42% of people said that they were using a CMMS to manage all their work orders and assets. And again, you know, what we did last year, what we did today is slightly different crews and crowds. But what we did see, I think, is an unequivocal change in the industry, is that COVID has accelerated this digital transformation for maintenance work, for people working in our industry. You know, we saw a pretty big increase in participants who were surveyed say that they are using technology now. And we tried to dig in a little bit deeper to better understand why. Why was this happening? And what we've learned, or what we could fathom, is that a lot of our customers, a lot of people that we talk to in the industry, they basically told us overnight they had to reduce in-office work density by up to 50%. That means 50% of people at the beginning of COVID basically had to work. And when you're using paper and pen, when you're using spreadsheets, or you got nothing at all, you know, that just does not work when you have half of your team working from home. And obviously things have gone to a little bit back to normalcy now. But when COVID first hit, I think that created a spark for a lot of businesses saying, oh, shoot, you know, paper and pencil filed away in filing cabinets just no longer works when we've got a distributed workforce. And so 66% of people that we surveyed are currently using technology to manage their maintenance, but still 34% of teams, you know, aren't. And there's still a big opportunity there. But what I can say as a future prediction here is that we think that this digital transformation in the maintenance reliability space will continue for the next year, 2 years ahead.
Well, with COVID, we want to do away with paper as much as possible. You know, we need something we can clean easy and so on.
Absolutely. And so what we said was, you know, hey, our survey is just one piece of data, but we wanted to validate this by looking at different sources as well. And so we found a study done by McKinsey on October 5th, 2020. And what they also said was that this COVID-19 crisis really accelerated the digital transformation interactions by several years, actually. It's not just isolated to the maintenance and reliability teams. It's also related to almost every single industry in the entire world. What made sense was that the acceleration pushed this digital transformation forward by several years, kind of looking at how fast or what share that are using these digital products. Last year is 36%, and we saw it spike up to 58% in a global sense, which is huge. Again, this pushed this need for digital transformation years ahead. And again, not just isolated to the maintenance and reliability industry, but to every single department in the industry. And so I wanted to ask this question to both you, Rob, and Rick, knowing that this digital transformation is being accelerated right now, what can make tech easier for maintenance and reliability teams to use? Like, what can make technology easier for teams to use? Maybe we could start with Rob first.
You mean like what type of technology should we be using, or what makes the technology easier?
I think it's both, right? Like what should technology be doing for other teams to make it easier to adopt? And also, what should teams be doing today to basically prepare themselves for this digital transformation?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I mean, what can technology do to be easier for maintenance teams? Basically be plug and play. However, it'll never work like that. It's because we're still in a people game, right? And robots are not fixing the equipment. Robots are, for the most part, not operating the equipment either. Yes, there are some aspects of like AI controlling processes and that kind of thing, but for the most part, it's still a people game. So to me, it's got to be very much about like the training around it, the leadership around it, the culture around it, what's in it for each level of the person. That's what it is for me. Now, in terms of what technology is out there that can make maintenance and reliabilities people's lives easier, like there's a lot of like predictive maintenance tools or technologies that are available to diagnose issues. And so like if you have, and a lot of plants do have like thousands of assets that are collecting, millions of data points, and it's impossible for one person to look at those. So if you can use the technology to your advantage, use expert rule systems, use machine learning, you can do things that people just don't have the time, bandwidth, or even sometimes the skill set to do.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, like some people are throwing it in the chat. It's definitely like people need to be involved in this, and you can't just like, and I think this is one of the things that is happening in our industry is people are going, we need to cut costs, we need to cut people, and let's throw technology at it.
Mhm.
But they're not thinking about what's the ramifications of that. And the ramifications, and Ricky has seen it, I've seen it, you've seen it, Ryan, I'm sure a bunch of people in the chat have seen it. We get overwhelmed by how many initiatives are going on at the same time, and no one drives them to the finish line. Yeah. And I think like that's where companies are going to be in 2021. They're going to be saying, we spent millions of dollars on this new tech and it ain't working. Why? And they're not going to be able to dig deep enough to understand why.
Yeah.
Well, I think some of the reason why technology is not being used because of lack of leadership. Leaders have to make it no option. You're going to use the technology. It's not an optional question. It's we will. Either that or go to work somewhere else. Because I mean, it's all about the technology and using. I think barcode scanners and stuff like that are important. I think PDAs are important for technicians to use because they can diagnose problems with it. They can also use it to check the parts in the storeroom, order parts they need for the job. So they go to the storeroom, the parts are waiting on them. If they find another problem on the equipment, they can go in and write another work request for it so it can go back and be restored later. So technology needs to be advanced more with people using it, not so much the technology, it's the use of the technology.
Absolutely. And there's such a good discussion going on in our chat from everything from David talking about Gen Z, Ray also talking about like how there's a new demographic of people joining this workforce. And, yes, they might be tech savvy, but do they also have the technical skills as well? It's such a really interesting question, and I'm sure we could spend hours on that.
Yeah.
All right, so we're running right up on time. What I wanted to do is just highlight some of our key takeaways from this study. And just to follow it up, what we're going to be doing is this is just 4 of our many, many different really interesting findings. What we're going to do is write out a report that summarizes all of this, and it also goes deeper in some areas. And we'll also share it with all of our attendees here today. Key takeaways from today. There were 4 key findings that we shared. One was that maintenance and reliability teams have been financially resilient in this face of COVID through the thick of it and also where we are today. The second key finding that we talked about today was there is a big disconnect between what's measured and what actually matters. We saw that what's being measured, the most common KPI was around planned maintenance, but what businesses really care about deeply is uptime and reducing downtimes and critical failures of their equipment. We talked about implementation success in our key finding number 3, and we saw that there's this beautiful bell curve, but when we dug in deeper into the data that helped shed some light into what made someone say very easy or very difficult, it was almost purely influenced by what type of system, what software they chose, and also how big the team was. And lastly, this big key takeaway number 4 was really how COVID-19 has really accelerated this digital transformation in the maintenance and reliability industry, and also every single industry that we saw from McKinsey as well. And so with that, I want to wrap it up here. I want to thank you, Rob and Ricky, for all of your insights, and thank everyone here for joining today and taking the time to listen about our survey results. And ultimately, let your voices be heard through this survey. We wouldn't have been able to do this without you guys. I want to remind everyone that the State of Maintenance 2021 report was brought to you by UpKeep. We are a mobile-first maintenance management solution that really makes it easy for teams to collaborate and accomplish more. I would highly encourage everyone, if you haven't heard of who UpKeep is, what UpKeep is, check us out. Really appreciate that. And hopefully we could help you and the team. With all that being said, Maura, I would love to open it up for any questions if we've got a minute or two.
Yeah, we have just a minute or two, so I think we can go ahead with one question before we run out of time, and then we'll announce the winners of the raffle as well. So the question is, what advice would you give to me or anyone who is beginning to think about bringing on a CMMS when we previously haven't had any technology tracking work? How can I frame the rollout to make sure that everybody embraces the technology when they might be reluctant?
That's a long question.
It is.
Training, education. You got to understand what's in it for them.
That's right. Yeah, that's what it is, right? You have to understand. I mean, there's a lot there, right? You got to understand your processes, you got to understand your procedures, but you also have to understand your people. And that's, I mean, we talked about that a bunch of times, so we won't beat the dead horse, but people, leadership, there you go.
Okay, well, if anyone has any questions, add it into our chat here, and we'll make sure to get around to all the questions. If we don't, we'll follow up with everyone directly. There are a few questions around the survey and also the raffle. How do you get into the raffle? Great question. Someone else actually responded. If you participated in the survey, you're automatically entered into this raffle. So should we get a drum roll here to reveal?
The raffle's over, so you can't get in now.
I think we are also doing a raffle for all the live attendees today. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. So we've updated the slide. Somebody who's attended today will be winning an Apple Watch. So without further ado,
here we go. And congratulations to all of our winners. We are giving away 5 $100 Amazon gift cards. So John Green, Kevin, Daniel, John, Angel, you guys are each going to receive a $100 Amazon gift card for being part of our survey. And then we got 3 grand prize Apple Watch winners. So these are awesome.
Awesome.
You guys don't have one already.
Joe, I saw you on the call, so congratulations.
All right, there we go. So Michael, Brian, and Joe are all going to receive an Apple Watch for part of our survey. And do you say we have one more slide that got updated?
Oh no, that was the winners of the raffle. That's updated. So Joe was our live attendee who won. So congrats, Joe.
All right, that's awesome. Congratulations again. We'll be following up in an email to you to walk you through how to redeem your Amazon gift card and also your Apple Watch. Congratulations and happy holidays. And with all that being said, I want to thank everyone just one more time for being here. I really appreciate it. This has been a quite the crazy year of ups and downs, and I'm really glad to be able to participate in these types of webinars with you, Rob, and Ricky, and all of our listeners today.
Awesome.
Thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.
All right. Happy holidays. So much, Maura, and the entire UpKeep team for helping organize this. thank you again for everyone who submitted a response to our survey, and thank you to everyone for being here today with us. Happy holidays.